It's my great pleasure to call the president of Chai, Elise Stanoski, forward to give our Devar Torah this morning.
So before you get to hear from Elise, I have the great honor and privilege as president of Beth Torah to introduce Elise, the president of Chai. So many of you here are aware that I was born and raised in the Maryland suburb of DC. But what you may not know is that my first airplane ride, I was 8 years old, was to Dallas. It was Beshert, I know, to visit my great-grandmother, my great-aunt and uncle, and my cousins, Elise and Charles. Surprise! Okay. Charles was born with Down syndrome. Growing up with Elise and Charles, I didn't think anything of Charles being different. Heck, my sisters and I thought Elise was different because we could never understand her thick Texas accent. Somehow she's lost it, I've gained it, but it doesn't sound so bad now. But all I knew was that Charles was my cousin, who's always had the biggest smile and hug for me, and taught me that disabilities can make someone even more precious. Jeff and Charles had this great rapport, teasing about my family being Washington Redskins and Baltimore Colts fan, while he and his family were huge Dallas Cowboy fans. And Charles would love coming over our house with his Dallas Cowboys jacket and just laugh at Jeff and I and point to his jacket. Our daughter, most of you know Brittany, met Charles when we moved to Dallas, and Brittany was just 3 years old. Brittany loved Charles, especially when he and his family spent holidays and Sunday visits with us. And Charles and Brittany would dance around the house together. Part of Brittany's bat mitzvah project involved Chai. Brittany said that Charles taught her that you always need to have a smile for everybody you meet. Jeff, Brittany, and I were so proud of Charles' accomplishments, thanks to his upbringing, you'll hear about later, at home, and then later at Chai. We continue to support Chai and the amazing work they do with their residents. So now, let me tell you a little bit about Elise. Elise Stanoski was born and raised in Dallas and graduated from Richardson High School. In 1982, she and her then-husband moved to Maryland, living part of the time with my mother in Maryland, until she got her dream job at Walt Disney World, and boy, was I jealous. After 6 years at Disney World, she moved back to Dallas to be near her family, where she met her soulmate and current spouse, our dear new cousin, not even new anymore, Robert Donosky. You're old. Okay. Elise has worked as executive assistant for over 40 years at Disney, and lastly, as the rabbi and cantor's assistant at Temple Shalom. In 2020, Elise retired and became the board chair at Chai, just in time to deal with the pandemic. Elise, they call me the wartime president, so I can share that with you. While Elise's term ends on March 9th, I know that her involvement and support of Chai will never end. When Elise told me she was going to be the next president of Chai, which overlapped with my presidency at Beth Torah, we planned to do all these great programs together. And then COVID hit. So I am so proud of Elise for taking on this leadership role and dedicating her time and passion to Chai and those with disabilities. Now it's my honor and pleasure to introduce the president of Chai, my cousin and my friend, Elise Stanoski.
Good morning. I'd like to thank Zelony and Linda for asking me to come today to speak on behalf of Community Homes for Adults Incorporated, also known as Chai, for Jewish Disability Awareness and Acceptance Inclusion Month. We in the Jewish community talk a lot about community and being part of the Jewish people. More than anything or any one commandment is the idea that from its very beginning, we Jews left Egypt together, we traveled the desert together, we stood at Mount Sinai together, we heard God's words together, and we are commanded to be an entire kingdom of priests together, all of us. Not just a few, not just some selected, all of us. This is demonstrated in two places in the Torah. In Leviticus, in describing the situation where someone in the community has contracted an illness. They are quarantined until such time as they are healed. Who knew quarantine would make so much sense? The important element is that the entire community did not continue their traveling onward until such time as that person was allowed back into the community, and from this we have two key takeaways. One, being part of the community was basic, and two, no one gets left behind. No one for any reason. Every person, regardless of their ability, is important and needed. In this week's Torah portion, Katisa, there is a verse describing the workings of the desert temple. The Torah describes that this sacred place, this tent of meeting, was available and whoever sought God would go there. That's incredible. Anyone who is seeking closeness and connection with God could go there. Anyone, again, regardless of their status or ability. All are necessary to create a community, and all are able to access God. Not some, all. These examples are not only descriptive of the Jewish people, but there's also a mandate to make sure our community does the same today. And here in Dallas, we do. In 1983, a small group of committed and dedicated community leaders, led by Carmen Miller Michael of blessed memory, realized their dream of establishing a group home under Jewish auspices for adults with intellectual disabilities. When the first group home, Miller House, opened, it was cutting edge in the field. The model for many decades had been institutional care. Since High operates under Jewish auspices, the residents are able to celebrate Shabbat and all the Jewish holidays in partnership and collaboration with local synagogues and volunteers. From High's beginning, the clear mission was to provide programs and services that enable individuals with intellectual disabilities to live as independently as possible and to enrich their lives by building relationships with each other as well as with the larger community. Over the years, High, the organization came to be known in the community as High House, but from the start, it was about so much more. Today, High maintains 8 group homes, provides services to individual clients in the community through Woolen's program services, and operates a group day hub program. Our agency has 29 residents, which love their homes. Yes, I said their homes. They are happy to be living in a home setting with others like them who are their family. Before COVID, all the residents gathered for Jewish holidays, picnics and barbecues, movie nights, and much more. That's a brief description of High, but now I'd like to tell you about myself and what High means to me. As stated before, my name is Elise Stanoski, and I am the board chair of High. I was born and raised in Dallas, and I'm lucky to have one of my cousins here today. You probably know her, Linda Markowitz. I've been around High since the 80s. My story begins with my brother Charles being born in November of 1961. After several days, they let my mom see her son, making sure she understood he was mongoloid, which was the term used for Down syndrome at that time. They also asked her to sign papers to put him in an institution. My mother said, "No way, he's my son. I'm taking him home." My mother was an amazing woman. Just because Charles had a disability, he still had to learn to use silverware, dress himself, tie his shoes, make his bed, keep his room clean, and so on. We were treated as equally as possible. Charles attended special ed classes at the elementary school next to our house until he aged out at 21. At this point, my parents didn't know what to do. The only option they had was to send him to live somewhere else, an institutional environment. By this time, I was married and living out of state, and when they told me, I was very upset. He had always lived at home. I didn't want my brother in an institution. All I'd ever heard was how badly people were treated. I kept hoping for a miracle. Luckily, our prayers were answered. My parents were talking with Carmen and Ludwig Michael at Temple Emmanuel one day. Carmen told them about High and that they had group homes. In fact, their second home had just opened, and their daughter was living there. My parents contacted High, and Charles was accepted and moved into Levy House. It was such a relief for me and my parents. It was close to their house, and it was Jewish. The next time I came home for a visit, they took me to see Charles, and I was thrilled. Charles, or Charlie, as his High family would call him, was so happy and proud of his room, which of course was decked out in Cowboys gear. After several years, Charles ended up being surrounded by women. He was the only man living in Levy House, and while I think he enjoyed being taken care of, he did not want to watch another Lifetime movie. About that time, it was decided to turn Todd House into an all-male home, so Charles moved there. It was great. He got to play basketball and watch football and other sporting events. About this time, I moved back to Dallas and saw Charles every week. He was so happy, working, attending sporting events, bowling, going to movies, celebrating Jewish holidays, and participating in Special Olympics, to name just a few. He especially loved music and going to dances. Once he heard Michael Jackson, that was it. He wouldn't get off the dance floor. Charles's funding from the state changed several years later, and he moved to the new Tobe House. Since this was a new home, Charles and his two housemates were able to pick out the paint color for their rooms. This made them feel special, and they could make it feel like it truly was their home. It was a change from what he was used to, 5 to 6 people living together, to just the 3 of them, but he loved it. He probably got more attention from the staff. High has been in my life for over 30 years. First as a sister of a resident, board member, and now as board chair. I don't know what would have happened to Charles if my parents had never heard of High. Over the years, the staff have gone over and above on so many occasions for my brother and my family. Sadly, in 2014, Charles passed away at the age of 52. I know he's with my mom and dad, and I miss him every day, but I'm so happy he had a full, wonderful life, and that I'm able to continue to be part of the High family. I hope that gives you a better understanding of what our agency is about. I'll be more than happy to answer any questions you may have after services. Thank you again for having me.
Elise, we've known for many years the good work that High does, but when you share such personal stories, then it really comes home. So thank you for teaching us about your brother and the work that High does.
Thank you.